Hi everybody, Jerry here. You know my videos are normally just racing or swim, but not usually political viewpoints, but I'm going to make an exception today because I believe this is important. I'm going to give my 5 reasons for a Republican not to vote for Donald Trump. I've been a Republican since 1980 and the Reagan election. I believed in the conservative principles of smaller government, fiscal responsibility, and a balanced budget. Though I believe that we are in the middle class overtaxed, I don't believe that tax cuts should benefit primarily people that are already so rich that extra money means virtually nothing to them. Though I have voted primarily Republican since 1980, I did not vote for Donald Trump. My primary reason was a lack of trust. I was originally from New Jersey and I knew of his horrid reputation as a cheat and a failure. Now, 4 years later, all of those suspicions have been confirmed and so much more. I left the party in 2018 after enduring 3 years of disgust with its behavior. These are my reasons for real Republicans to repudiate this failure of a president and replace him for now with a Democrat, but with an eye to the future. Republicans need to rebuild the party based on its core values and the reality of the medical and environmental crises that demand action, currently considered liberal or progressive. These, therefore, are my top 5 reasons for Republicans not to vote for Donald Trump. Number 5, corruption. Trump's self-dealing is certainly unconstitutional, violating the Emoluments Clause, and borders on criminal. He has forced foreign governments to stay at his properties, particularly the Trump Hotel in Washington near the White House. He's spent a huge proportion of his leisure time, which is a lot of it, at his own golf courses and resorts, which obligates all of his Secret Service guardians to contribute to his own company's coffers. He directed his VP and staff to stay at one of his properties in Scotland, far away from the meeting he was supposed to attend. He even attempted to steer the G7 International Financial Conference to his own Doral Golf Club, which would have lined his pockets with millions of dollars of foreign money. Number 4, authoritarian instincts. Trump admires dictators such as Erdogan, Xi, Kim Jong-un, and most of all, Vladimir Putin. When Xi declared himself president for life in China, his reaction was, "That sounds great, we'll have to give that a shot someday." And I'll put a link to the audio where he said that down below. His overreaching executive orders have been overturned by courts at least 70 times. His recent use of federal troops in Portland to stifle peaceful protesters' First Amendment rights of free speech, in my opinion, was disgusting. Almost every day he does something I consider unconstitutional in order to consolidate his own power. His most recent interruption of mail service to interfere with the election is an example of this. Number 3, criminal activity. He cheats at everything. Growing up and attending school in New Jersey before moving to Florida in 1980, I was well aware that the Trump Organization was basically a criminal enterprise with deep connections to the mob. I'm starting to lose track of the number of crimes that Trump himself has committed and gotten away with during his time in office, starting with one that helped get him elected. He committed a felony campaign finance violation by paying off 2 women to keep quiet about his extramarital affairs right before the election, a crime for which his personal attorney was sentenced to 3 years in jail. Trump himself was implicated in that crime as directing the commission of it by the court that sentenced his lawyer. The Mueller report cites Trump in the commission of 11 felony obstruction of justice charges. I can list 5 federal crimes that he committed during the Ukraine affair, for which he was impeached. Bribery, which is in the Constitution, by the way, and that is Federal Code 18 U.S.C. 201. Soliciting foreign campaign contributions, which is Federal Code 52 U.S.C. 30109 and 30121. Coercion of political activity, 18 U.S.C. 610. Misappropriation of federal funds, 18 U.S.C. 641. And obstruction of Congress, 18 U.S.C. 1505 and 1512. I was truly astonished and more than a little angry that only one Republican, Mitt Romney, chose to put country over party and find Trump guilty of these crimes. In more patriotic times, the Republican Party acknowledged the crimes of Richard Nixon and forced him from office. Number 2, incompetence. What has Trump personally accomplished during his presidency? The answer is basically nothing. There has only been one major piece of legislation passed under his tenure, the 2017 tax reform bill. This bill, initiated by Kevin Brady, with virtually no input by Trump, though he tries to take credit for it, has not had a positive effect on the economy, and primarily benefited the ultra-rich. He has rubber-stamped nominations of federal judges, mostly recommended to him by the Federalist Society. But has he actually accomplished anything personally? No. He spends most of his day watching television news shows and has spent more than 30% of his days golfing, at his own resorts, of course. And worst of all, his response to this coronavirus crisis has been astoundingly, horrifyingly bad. He first tried to ignore it, then deny it, then actively obstruct the proper responses that would get it under control. With 4% of the world's population, the U.S. now has 25% of the world's cases and the highest death rate of any nation on earth. With the proper response, the virus's intrusion into American life could have been held to a minimum and quelled almost immediately. In fact, Trump fired the entire pandemic response team in 2017 that had been set up by previous administration just to handle such a crisis. 170,000 American deaths and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression has been the result. And now the number one reason that Trump must go: disloyalty to our country. It has been said by more than one person that with Trump all roads lead to Russia, and for a very good reason. It is my firm belief that Trump is financially owned by Vladimir Putin. In the late 90s and the early 2000s, Trump borrowed billions of dollars from Deutsche Bank to build golf courses and other properties. This was coming off a period of financial instability for the Trump organization that had resulted in a number of bankruptcies, and no legitimate bank would lend him a penny. Deutsche Bank, for some reason, was more than willing to finance this risky investment. The reason became quite clear to me in January of 2017, when Deutsche Bank was fined $630 million for its part in a $10 billion Russian money laundering scheme. And I'll put a link to that down below. The number of decisions that Trump has directed while in office that directly benefit Putin is staggering. I've lost count of the number of times that Trump has favored Putin's opinions over that of his own agencies. Recall his traitorous statements in Helsinki. His failure to call out Putin over bounties on American soldiers' lives was atrocious. In the 8 phone calls that he's had with Putin since March, he failed to mention the issue even once. What in the world have they been talking about in all those calls? I suspect how best Russia can interfere with another of our elections. In conclusion, it is the patriotic duty of all good Republicans to admit that this experiment in alternative government was a miserable failure and begin anew the task of rebuilding the Republican Party based on its core values and reality. Thank you for listening, and share this if you agree.